I know many of you guys are not going to hear me in this video. You are dead set on your chosen value system, and I understand. Nonetheless, if you are one of those who will disagree with most of what I have to say today, I appreciate your viewership, and I hope we can have a healthy discussion about this topic down in the comments. What is this value system I'm referring to? This is the mistake. The word mistake is meant to get your attention, but if you're asking me, I do believe it is a mistake, and we're going to talk about it. The value system is this: no matter how amazing a fragrance smells, if it is not what can be deemed a strong fragrance, then it's not worth having, nor trying, especially if it is relatively expensive. Now, to get it out of the way, am I against strong fragrances? Beast mode fragrances, as they're often called? No. Now, am I against overwhelming fragrances that can even be too much for the wearer? Yeah. Now you might ask, well, what is an example of that? Well, this was actually sent to me by a subscriber. Thank you, Paris. To be honest, I might end up returning this to him because it's too much. It's from a Kuwaiti brand known as Primera Perfumes. They call it Royal Vetiver. This is what I would call a fragrance that is too strong. It's overkill. I was thinking about doing a whole video on this topic of fragrances that are too strong, but I probably won't. Nonetheless, this is a really interesting scent. It's a very different take on vetiver, but it is simply overwhelming, even on a blotter left out in a room. I sprayed this on a blotter for the first time when I smelled it. I left it out on my little counter over here, and it was filling this room and making it almost unbearable to be in here for more than a few minutes. Maybe 2 sprays on that blotter.
Just kidding, it was 1.
And then after that I said, well, let's see how it does on skin. Let's just say after 15 hours, I was scrubbing it off. And the next day it was still there. My wife couldn't take it anymore. I'm digressing. This is the type of strong fragrance that I am not really about. Now, there is a shared thought among many frag heads, and it's as simple as this: if it costs a lot of money, then it needs to perform. Obviously, this idea is relative. It's going to mean something different to different people. Some people are just looking for a full works day worth of longevity, let's say around 8 hours. I think that's reasonable. I have no qualms with that. That's usually about as long as I want or need a fragrance to last. And some of you even watching this video are looking for a fragrance to last as long as possible and or be strong enough to be detectable by everyone, no matter what the situation is. My question to this group is always, why? And I don't mean to step on any toes, and I don't mean to demean anyone, but I do think that leaning on fragrances for that reason, to be noticed at all costs, that is an issue of insecurity and possibly ego. So even though I asked you why, I think it's always good to ask yourself, why do I do what I do? That is imperative to life. Moving on. Now, I'm very clear about my belief and my stance on this matter. Scent is always number 1. Why? Because if I am going to consider performance, there is a time and a place for all varieties of strength. It's similar to how you wouldn't sensibly wear a wool coat on a hot day or dress shoes on the basketball court. Every tool has its use. For me, on my skin and my wearing, this fragrance, Tom Ford Mandarino di Amalfi, only lasts maybe about 4 or 5 hours. But on a hot day out, this is literally perfect. It's so refreshing. It's uplifting, juicy mandarin orange, some white florals in there, mint, all kinds of things going on in here. Just uplifting, but it's only going to last me a few hours, and that's all I need it for. I know that especially in the summertime, later in the afternoon, I'll probably be taking a second shower for the day and putting on something else for the evening. That something else could be Oud Wood from Tom Ford, a lovely fragrance that is also reported to not perform well for most people. I myself get about 5 or 6 hours out of this one. And if I am going to wear it on a night out, which is when I would normally wear it, I only need it for maybe 4 or 5 hours. That's about as long as I'm going to be out, and then I'm coming back home and I don't need to smell this anymore. By the way, I bought both of these fragrances myself. I understand that one could easily make the argument that reviewers are more likely to defend expensive and reportedly bad performing fragrances that they got for free. I can't speak for everyone across the board, so that may or may not be true depending on the case. Nonetheless, there are many fragrances in this category that I would defend simply because they smell amazing. As I said, scent is number 1 for me. And for that reason, I would buy them myself. But we need to get to the crux of this. Everything else I just said is important to consider, but this is the bone of the meat. This is the eye of the hurricane.
What?
This is the most volatile variable that we need to consider if we're going to talk about performance. Yes, you. I see you. You're the variable. I know this might seem obvious, but ironically, it seems to be the first thing we overlook. We overlook ourselves when we talk about fragrances. Now, I did a whole video all about how and why your fragrance may not be lasting or detectable. You can check it out at the card up above. And I'm kind of rehashing some of that content because it bears repeating. There are several elements at play when experiencing a fragrance. Number one, the condition of your skin. Dry, oily, dirty, clean, porous. All of these attributes affect how a fragrance will react. A lot of people sum it all up to skin chemistry. Nonetheless, that is huge and it differs from person to person. It's important to understand your skin so you know kind of what to expect from most fragrances. That is your responsibility. Number two, the volatility of the ingredients in a particular fragrance. Now, this is getting a little bit deeper into the technical side of perfumery, of which I have no experience or expertise, but I do have some study. The fragrance you're wearing could consist of some more volatile ingredients, which means they are more quickly evaporating and diffusing, which means that they are flying off of your skin, which means that they will disappear quickly. If the entirety of the composition consists of more volatile ingredients, then yes, that means it's going to possibly disappear quicker. On the contrary, if you have slower evaporating ingredients, less volatile ones, then they will evaporate obviously more slowly, which means they're going to stick around a little longer. But this does not always mean that you'll smell them. Why? Because of point number three, where you spray and how you smell your fragrance. The bottom line here, if you are overloading your nose with your fragrance by either spraying all over your chest or the front of your neck, or if you're shoving your scent up your nostrils by way of your hand or wrist or a blotter, then you are likely going to experience olfactory fatigue. This is probably the most overlooked element from review to review on a fragrance. It can happen slowly or it can happen quickly, depending on the ingredients used in the fragrance and how you're exposed to them. So when people say,
I wish this fragrance lasted longer,
or
it's not worth the money because it doesn't last.
While these are relatively harmless claims, they're incomplete. When you look at the performance ratings of a fragrance, of any fragrance on Fragrantica, and I mean any fragrance on Fragrantica, especially ones with higher traffic, while there is usually a majority vote of what people's experience was with that particular fragrance, there are always outliers. Always. Every time. Take a look at these graphs. You'll always see votes on every single category. Don't you think that means something? Even if a perfumer intentionally includes more fixative ingredients that are intended to make the fragrance last longer, there will always be people who don't experience that. Always. Every time. That's why you have people saying that Dior Sauvage Elixir lasts 20 hours on them and other people saying it lasts 45 minutes. All that being said, this is the more reasonable assessment when evaluating weak performance.
Man, you know what? I love the scent of Elysium, but unfortunately, I can't detect it after 3 hours on my skin. Nonetheless, I understand that others report having better performance.
Notice the difference between detect and last. Big difference here. Our senses are incredible, but by nature they are wildly different from person to person and also not completely perfect. Just because you can't smell a fragrance doesn't mean it's not there. I'm sorry that's not very fair, but it's the truth. Therefore, I just ask that you please do not taint the reputation of a great smelling fragrance by saying it doesn't last, so therefore it's not worth it. You may not intend to, but you are possibly turning others away from experiencing a fragrance they might love regardless of the performance, but it could possibly even perform better on them than it does on you. So don't forget, you are the variable. I am the variable. Try to shift your thinking, and that's all I really have to say. So perhaps some of you are not happy. Maybe you didn't even make it this far in the video, but I hope you did, and I would love to know your thoughts down in the comments, so please consider leaving them down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. Peace. I'll see you in the next one.